My Learning Center activity is called the Brainstorm board game. And what you do is it's designed for third grade, and they will work their way around the board. And as they work around the board, they will write a paper as a group. This is designed for the third grade. It is for production and distribution of writing, organization, and it goes along with the laughs that says, with guidance and support from peers and adults, develop and strengthen writing as needed by planning, revising, and editing. And then the Common Core standard is exactly the same. And then we have the ESOL standards, which is conduct ESOL programs within the parameters, goals, and stipulations of the Florida Consent Decree, create a positive classroom environment to accommodate the various learning styles, and determine and use appropriate instructional methods and strategies for individuals and groups using knowledge of first and second language acquisition processes. The purpose of this activity is for students to have a game that teaches and reiterates the writing process for them, and they'll be able to work together to develop their writing skills. The rationale is to have students excited about writing and get them involved with peer reviewing and ingrain the writing process within them. So for students, they'll be put into groups of 3 and 4, and they will find a game piece somewhere in the room. For this demonstration, we have a fake flower, but that is our game piece. And the teacher will decide whichever team goes first, whatever the teacher wants to be that decision-making aspect. And then the teams will be asked a vocabulary question. So for instance, the teacher could ask, use the word passage in a sentence. And so a student could say, for Columbus, his passage across the Atlantic Ocean was difficult. And the teacher could say, all right, that's really good. You can move 2 spaces. So they would then move 2 spaces as a group because they answered correctly. Now, if they used the word incorrectly, they would only be allowed to move 1 space. Once every group has a turn, it'll eventually come to the point that they land on the brainstorm spot. You're not allowed to skip these spots that are written on, because those are the spots that action is actually taking place. For the brainstorm spot, you would go to the topic section, and whatever group gets there first will be able to pick their topic. Let's say one group picks sports, so they will pull sports out, and then that will be their topic. Students are on the brainstorm square. They've gone down to the topic section and chosen sports. Then they're given a sheet of paper, and their organization will look something like this. They'll have pretty much a brainstorming chart where they have sports, and they have the different sports out from those, and then they write the small aspects about those sports. And that's designed to get them ready for their writing and to get their ideas flowing. So then it'll eventually work around to where they'll be asked more vocabulary questions, such as, what does elegant mean? And students will answer. If they answer correctly, 2 spaces, if not 1. But eventually they'll come back around to the organizing ideas spot. What they will do at this section is they'll go to the organizing box, and in this box they see that there is an intro with 1 point, body with 3 ideas, and then a conclusion where they review. In this section, students are kind of outlining their paper through the organization of their ideas. So they'll have their intro talking about sports, and then maybe one idea will be baseball, one idea will be football, and one idea could be volleyball. And then within those, afterwards they will conclude. Then, eventually, it gets back around that students will be asked more vocabulary questions to advance around the board even longer, and they'll come to the composing section. When they get to composing, they'll go to the composition square or rectangle within the middle, and this is where they go from being an outline to actually writing. So for their intro, they know that sports is their 1 point, and now they're writing 3 sentences leading into sports. Then with the body, if baseball was their first point, they'll write 3 sentences about baseball, 3 sentences about football, and 3 sentences about volleyball, and they conclude with 3 sentences. And this is designed to be an overarching thing. This isn't going to be their best writing, but it will be peer writing together and an idea of what to do later on. So when it comes time for them to write 5 sentences in a paragraph or 5 sentences per point, they can do so, but this is mainly just laying the groundwork for that. Then we have students ask more vocabulary, finally coming to the revision section. This is where students get to the point that they give their paper to another team, and it's up to that team to edit their paper, revise, give them ideas on how they can make it flow better, their sentence structure, their grammar, and this is to help them learn how to take positive criticism and use it in their papers. This depends on all teams working together at this point, so it's almost as if the game is put aside for a second and it becomes a whole classroom activity, and then students will come down and work their way to the editing square. Again, more vocabulary questions to be able to advance. And in the editing square, they'll come up here and they'll see that it says check over all markings and compose your final draft. As a group, this is where they write their final draft, and each member of the group at the end will sign their name to the draft saying that they contributed and they're happy with where it is. And then the teacher, they will hand it to the teacher and they will come to the finish line. Whoever finishes first is really not that important. It's more about the quality of the writing, and the true winner will be decided at maybe even the next day after the teacher has a chance to look over all the papers from the groups. And that is the Brainstorm Writing Learning Center. For the Brainstorm board game, it is expected that some students may not be completely fluent in English, and so for those students in the pre-production stage, they'll be permitted to choose the team that they feel the most comfortable with. They'll be given vocabulary questions that are on their developmental level. They'll be given a peer that they feel comfortable with to review the composition. They will be permitted to choose the topic they desire to write about, even if the topic happens to already be taken, because it's important that they have background knowledge to be able to write on, not necessarily just write about something we give them. And then finally, they'll be given a different rubric that's a little more lenient and not as intensive. For the early production stage, students will be permitted to choose a team they feel comfortable with. They'll be given vocabulary questions on their developmental level. They'll be given a peer that they feel comfortable with, and the students will be given a different rubric for more lenient grading. Speech emergence stage, they'll be permitted to choose the team they're most comfortable with. They'll be given vocabulary questions on their developmental level, and they'll be given a different rubric that is more lenient for grading. For intermediate fluency, students will be given vocabulary questions that are on their developmental level, and students will be permitted to use a native language to English dictionary. And finally, at advanced fluency, it is up to the teacher, depending on how fluent the student is and whether they think they're capable of doing the whole thing without modifications. But if they feel the need to do so, they can give the student a native language to English dictionary.